What's up, guys? My name is Kyle Gibson, and I am going to be taking you guys through a little overview of the Nord today. Maybe you found yourself the proud new owner of a Nord, or maybe you are a volunteer and your leader has sat you down in front of this spaceship that is the Nord, and you just are trying to figure out what all these things do. Today we're just going to be quickly going over all the different sound engines and kind of all these buttons and what they do. And hopefully at the end of this video, you're going to have a little bit more of an idea of what you're actually doing when you're sitting down in front of the Nord and being able to get the most out of it. So let's dive right into it. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to notice about your Nord when you sit down in front of it is that there are these little orange tabs that kind of tell you that there's different sections. There's three main sound engines. You have your organ, which is this section right here. You have your piano, which is this little guy right here. And you have your synth section. The synth section is actually, in my opinion, one of the most powerful sections. There's a lot going on here. We'll dive a little bit into that and kind of show you what some of these things do. You have the extern section, which we won't go into too much today. Basically, you can patch in a second set of sound banks from like main stage, or if you're running like a Yamaha motif or something, you can actually patch those in here and run everything through the MIDI triggers of the Nord. And then you have your effects section, which you can assign these to go to any effect, and you can affect the organ, and you can affect the piano, and you can affect the synth, all independently of each other. And then finally you have your output settings, which are all the way over here on the right. You've got your compressor, and you have your reverb. And I'll kind of show you what some of these things do. So let's go back over here to the organ. If you'll notice, there's like an on-off button. So right now there's nothing on. I'm only on slot A, so if I play, there's nothing happening because there's no sound engine on. So that's pretty important to understand. You have to actually turn on a specific section for it to be active. So let's go ahead and turn on the organ, and you can see now we've got some sound here. This is actually just set up on the B3, which was one of my favorite ones. You'll notice that these are not actual sliders. These are just buttons that will affect the different parts of the organ. I like a full sounding organ, so I'm going to go ahead and turn on all of the different simulated strings, and you can hear that. One cool thing about the organ is there's actually a rotary speaker built right in, which is kind of like the output settings down here. It's mainly made for the organ. You see there's these different options. You can actually assign it to the organ, piano, or synth. You could turn that on, and it's just a cool rotary speaker. I'm going to turn the drive down so it's nice and clean. You hear that sound. You can speed it up, slow it down. So that's kind of what the rotary speaker does. Really cool. And that was just the Hammond B3 with the rotary speaker on. And I just kind of turned all these string settings up so you got a nice full. You can turn up the bass a little bit more and give it a little bit more oomph. And if you're really fancy, slide your finger up there. You can make it go faster and slower. So that's the organ kind of in a nutshell. Now we're going to go ahead and turn the piano on. So one thing to notice in the piano section is there's all these different options that you can select. There's E-piano 1, E-piano 2. There's a clavinet, is what it's called here. I just call it a clave. There's a harpsichord, grand, and upright. So I like the grand piano. Number 3 is my favorite. It's the bright grand. I have my effects on right now. I'm going to go ahead and just turn all those off for a second. So you can select which model. There's 5 models of the grand. There is like 6 or 7 models of the upright. You can go through on the E-piano. There's lots of options that you can do with the piano really quickly. You can see that there's pedal noise that you can assign. You can do string res. And one thing to note about all these buttons is there's On top of them, there's like a main function and a little white lettering. That's what the button does without holding shift. If you hold shift, it does what's underneath the button. And so it's going to be too much to talk about what everything does because it's all kind of related to which sound engine you're in. But just note that the shift button controls what's under the button, and the button on top is what the button does. What the word on top is what the button does without holding the shift. So you can change some of the like intensities of the piano. This is just your volume knob, turns it up and down. I like to keep it around 70 to 80%, just as a general rule. So that's the piano in a nutshell. Now the synth, there are tons of different settings that you can use on the synth section. This one, you'll see there's 190 different sounds that you can do, and you can manipulate them all and change them all to sound however you want. One of my favorite ones is 77, and just off the bat, it's probably not going to sound the greatest. You've got a little frequency. You can change the frequency of it right here. You can change the shape of the wave and how it moves. You can change the different filtering types. So one thing I would say is it's really important to know what everything does and play around with it, and see how that goes. There's also like a little side amp here on the synth section that you can actually dial in the attack and the decay and the release. And so one thing to note about the Nord in general that is, it's cool, but it's also kind of a negative. There's a mix between analog and digital here. So you'll see all these, I call them infinity knobs. You can keep spinning them any direction. There's no stopping point. They're just infinity knobs. Those are all digital. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 digital knobs on here. And all the organ knobs are also digital because there's no like stopping point. But all these other little turn knobs have like a stopping point. Now, what's important to note about that is when you're switching between patches, and say you have, let's just do an easy example. If you have your reverb all the way up on one, and then you switch back to your other one and you want to add some reverb and there's none, and you move this, it's going to automatically jump up to 100%, because it didn't save. It's not a digital knob. It goes to where it is physically as soon as you touch it. So that's one thing to note about the Nord in general, is to just kind of know what all these things do, play around with them and dial in your settings. So that's kind of an overview of all the sound engines. I want to say one more thing over here, on these little doohickeys here. This button on most of your patches is going to be already assigned to be a pitch shifter. You can change it to do a couple other things, but you'll notice I just have some strings here, and if you tilt it up, it changes the pitch up. You do that, changes it down. It's really cool for like some synth lead stuff. You can kind of do some fun stuff with that. The morph wheel, you can basically have it do anything as well. I like to use the morph wheel personally as kind of a fader, because there's not really any faders on this keyboard surface. There's just circular knobs, and when I'm going through and playing, I think it's easier to use this as a fader, just because it's actually, they have it angled really nicely for where your hand would actually go. You kind of just slide it on there, and you can actually assign this to turn up the volume of one of your patches, or you can use it for a crossfade, and you can actually turn up one patch while the other one's turning down. The other thing that you can use, as I have this Moog control pedal, and you can use this in the exact same function as you use the morph wheel, and you can use them both at the same time. So you could actually have one that turns up your piano and turns down your E piano, or you could have one that, and the other one could do the synth on layer A and turn down the synth on layer B while it's turning up the synth on layer A. So there's a lot of really cool flexible stuff. A lot of people will either get the Nord and not know what to do with it or how to make it functional. Or a lot of people are even nervous to like get a Nord because they don't think that they can make it as functional as, say, like a main stage setting where you can just easily switch between things and have faders. You can do a lot with it if you know what you're doing. So that's the control pedal. Also really fun for like organ swells and stuff. You can actually make this speed up your rotary speaker as well, so that's pretty fun. So yeah, that's your basic overview. Left to right, you've got, you know, your organ, your piano, your synth engine. Those are your main sound engines. That's where everything's going to come from. Right here in the center, this is your kind of your home base, your computer. This is where all your computing. There's this is like the only screen on here, so this is what you can see what you're doing. Your live modes, your program banks, you save everything there. And then after you set up all your sounds here, you kind of move to your external section, where your effects and your compressor. These are your output settings. So this is your main sound build right here. This is to kind of morph the sound and affect it to sound how you want. And these are your final output settings. So I hope this video has helped you guys, and more to come.
Hey, thanks so much for watching to the very end of the video. If there was something in this video that we didn't cover that you would love to know more about, let us know down in the comments. And be sure to subscribe to us, like this video, so you can see more content that is like this.